Okay, welcome to General Physiology. So in today's lecture, we are going to look at the concept of neurons. So what is neurons? Neurons are the specialized cells that are found in the brain or in the nervous system. In fact, neurons are the fundamental building blocks of the nervous system. So they are the specialized cells that are responsible for transmitting information throughout the body from the brain. So neurons, they are cells and they are structural and the functional unit of the nervous system. So if there is no neuron cells, then it means that there will be a problem with the nervous system. In fact, if there is no neurons, no nervous system. If there is problem with the neurons, then there is a problem with the nervous system because all the information that are transmitted from the brain to all part of the body is through the neurons. So understanding the structure and the functions of the neurons is essential for grasping how the brain and nervous system operate. So if you are able to understand the concept of the nervous system, you will have an idea of how the brain and the nervous system operate in trying to maintain or in trying to bring coordination to the living organism. So now let's look at the structure of the neurons. So the neurons is made up of three major parts. So neurons are made up of three major parts. This part includes we have number one, we have cell body. That is the first part of the neurons. We have dendrites and we have axon. So axon, cell body, and dendrites are the three major components of the neuron. So you can see even from here clearly from the structure, this is the dendrites. This is the, of course, the axon. We have dendrite, we have axon, and then we also have the cell body. So then, of course, the cell body contains the nucleus and the organelles that are essential for neural function. So the cell body is actually a part of the neuron that contain the nucleus and the organelles of the cells that are actually important for the essential functions of the cell, of the neuron cells. So now let's look at what this cell body does. So the cell body contains nucleus which controlled the cell's activity. So remember, each and every activities of the cell is controlled by its own nucleus. So the cell body is the part of the neurons that contain the nucleus and the organelles of the cell. So it means that the cell body is the complete neurons because it contains the nucleus and then the organelles of the cell. So this nucleus and the organelles of the cells are essential or are important for the neuron function. So then the next one after the neurons is, of course, the dendrite. So dendrite is the next component or part of the neuron. So what dendrite does, it receives signals from other neurons. So the cell body receives messages for the cells. So, of course, in the body or in the brain, there are billions of neurons. So each of the neurons communicates with another neurons. So therefore, the dendrite of the neuron, the dendrite of every neuron, the dendrite of every neuron receives signals. That is, they receive messages from the nearby cells. They receive messages from the nearby cells. So that is how, or that is what happened. Like, for example, let's look at this. If you can clearly see from here, this is the dendrite. So dendrites, this is the dendrite, look at them here. So they are actually a part of the neurons that receive messages from the nearby neurons cells, while the axons transmit infos away from the cell body. So that what the axons does, it actually sends a message away from the neurons. So you see, the dendrites is the part of the neurons that receive messages from other neuron cells. while the axon transmit message away from the cell body. So dendrite receive message, axon send message from a particular neurons. So this is actually one thing that we should put at the back of your mind when we are talking about neurons. So these three components, they are very important. The cell body contains nucleus and organelles of the neuron cells, which are essential for the functions of the neurons. And then the dendrite receive messages from other neurons, while axons send messages to other neuron cells or away from the cell body to other cells. So we'll see how the dendrite of one cells and the axons of another neuron cells communicate as we are actually continuous with the discussion. So let's for further actually explanation, this is also you can see clearly here that the nerve cells are known as the neurons. So nerve cells are also called neuron. And one thing that we should understand, the longest cells that are found in human is the neurons. So the nerve cells are the longest cells that are found in humans. Then neurons are the main structure and the functional unit of the nervous system as explained earlier. So the structural and the functional unit of the nervous system is the neurons. So neurons is what determine the structure and functions of each nervous system. So if there is a problem with neuron cells, then there is problem with nerve cells. If there is a decrease in number of the neuron cells, then there is a decrease in function of the nervous system. So then, so therefore, the structural and the functional unit of the neurons is, the structural and the functional unit of the nervous system is neurons. So if there is a problem with the nervous system, then it means that the problems is actually coming from the neurons. So the functions and the structure of every parts of the neurons depend on the neurons. And then in addition, as I mentioned earlier, that this is the dendrite. So the dendrite, as you can see, the major function of the dendrite in the neurons is to receive signals from other neurons and transmit these signals to the neuron cell body for processing. So when a particular neuron receive message from the nearby neuron cells, they will actually transmit those neurons to the cell body where they are going to be processed. Then after processing, then the next thing is, of course, the axons. So the axons will now send the processed information away from the neurons to other cells of the body. So then we have the nucleus. So as if you could remember, I told you that the cell body contains nucleus. So the nucleus, of course, you remember that the nucleus contains genetics material, which is DNA and RNA. So genetics material is DNA, which is actually present in the chromosome. So we have nucleus, and in the nucleus we have chromosomes, and then the chromosomes contain DNA, and the DNA will be transcribed into messenger RNA. So therefore, the most important thing that you should understand here is the DNA is the language of life. So each and every cell of the body, it appears the way it is because of the DNA. So therefore, the activities of the neuron cells is controlled by the nucleus of the cell. And then in addition, we have myelin sheets. So we have myelin sheets in the neuron. So this myelin sheets is a structure that insulates axons to increase the speed and efficiency of electrical signal transmission. So in the neuron cells, we have myelin sheet, and the major functions of the myelin sheet is to cover and insulate the axons, which subsequently leads to increase in the speed and the efficiency of the electrical signal across the neurons cell. And then the next one is also, let's look at the axon terminal. So the axon terminal also release the major function of the axon terminals, as you can see from here. They are the terminal end of the axons where the neurotransmitters are released. So these neurotransmitters, if you could remember from our previous classes, I actually mentioned that neurotransmitters are the biomolecules that aid in transmission of information. So therefore, the axons release neurotransmitters which actually transmit signals, that is, transmit messages across the synapses to other neurons, muscles, or glands of the body. So this is actually a major part of the nucleus where we need to actually look at them closely and their functions. So see in this, you can see that actually from here we have talked about the dendrites, we have talked about the cell body, we have talked about the nucleus, myelin sheath, axon terminal, and then we also talk about axon. So the axon conducts electrical impulse away from the neuron's body to another neuron's muscles or gland. So remember actually from the previous slide, I explained that all the messages or all the signals in one neurons are sent away to other neurons, muscles, and the glands through the axon. So all the information, all the messages that are present in one particular neurons are sent away through the axon. So it means that if there is a problem in the axon, it means that there will be no transmission of signals or there is no transmission of messages from that particular neurons to another neurons or muscles or the glands. Then there is also Niels granules, which actually I didn't talk about it. So what is Niels granules? So the Niels granules we can see clearly here, is a cell body that contains granular bodies called Niels granules. So this is actually the most important thing that you should understand when we are talking about neurons. It is the structural component or the structural and the functional unit of neurons. So each and every neurons of the body are controlled by, each and every activities that are taking place in the nervous system is controlled by the neurons. And the longest cells in human body is the nerve cell. So you should get this. And then also the neurons is made up of different components, dendrites, axon, and the cell body. And the cell body contains nucleus, and the nucleus is actually the organelles that control all the activities of the neurons. And then in addition, there are 3 types of neuron based on the number of axon and the dendrite. So we start with actually multipolar. So multipolar is the first type of neurons that contain 1 axon and 2 or more dendrites. So you see the multipolar contain only 1 axon with 2 or more than 2 dendrites. So it can be 3, it can be 4, it can be 5, it can be 6. So it's usually start from 2. So the dendrites started from 2 with only 1 axon in the case of multipolar neuron. So the multipolar neurons are usually found in the cerebral cortex. So it is found in the cerebral cortex. Then the next one is bipolar. So bipolar contain 1 axon and 1 dendrite. So 1 axon, 1 dendrite. That is why it is called bi-2. So 1 axon and 1 dendrite, and it is usually found in the retina of the eye. And then the next one is unipolar. So from the word uni means 1. So it's a cell body with 1 axon only, and it is typically found in embryonic stage. So this is actually the different types of neurons that are found in the body based on the number and differences of axons and the dendrites. So then, of course, we have another types of neurons based on their functions. So the other one is the types of neurons based on the number of axon and dendrite, but there is also types of neurons based on their function. So we have 3 major types of neurons based on their function. Number one, we have sensory neurons, we have motor neurons, and we have interneurons, or we can also call them relay neurons. So what these sensory neurons does, they carry information from sensory receptors to the central nervous system. What are the sensory receptors? Don't forget, ladies and gentlemen, whenever we say sensory information, there are informations like vision, hearing, smell, taste, touch, movement, and balance, hunger, pain, and thirst. These are the examples of the sensory information. So these sensory informations are usually come from sensory organs, and each and every sensory organs have their own sensory receptors. So when information is carried from the sensory receptors to the central nervous system, that work is done usually by sensory neurons. So the sensory receptors send message or information from the sensory receptors to the central nervous system. That is from the eyes, from the skin, from the eyes, from nose, from tongue. All this information are carried to the central nervous system. And then the next types of the neurons is, of course, motor neurons. So what is motor neurons and what does it do? So the motor neurons is actually another types of neurons that transmit signals from the central nervous system to muscles and gland, facilitating movement. So you see, in the case of motor neurons, there are neurons that are associated with movements. So that is why motor neurons usually send message from the central nervous system. That is, the information is going away from the central nervous system to muscles and gland, where it facilitates movement of an organisms like human. Then we have interneurons or relay neurons. Is the types of the neurons that connects. It connects both the sensory and motor neurons in the central nervous system. So the connecting point between sensory neurons and the motor neurons is interneurons. So then the next thing that we are going to look at is neuron communications. So neurons communicate through a process called synaptic transmission. So usually neurons, they actually communicate with one another. As I said, there are billions of neurons that are found in human brain. And each of these neurons, they have their own way of communication. So the neurons communication is through synaptic transmission, and this communication involves the release of neurotransmitters from one neuron that bind to the receptors to another neuron. So you see, as I said, there are billions of neurons that are found in the brain. So each of the neurons has its own neurotransmitters that are found to be released when there is communication. And then at the same time, the neurons also have receptors. So when neurons release the receptors, when the neurons release the neurotransmitters, they usually bind to the receptors to another neuron. So once that happens, like for example, let's look at this thing. You see, this is the two different demonstration of two neurons. So this is the first one. So you can see clearly here, this is an example of receptor from one neurons, and this is also another receptor. So these are the receptors that are found on the surface of the neuron. So, and then this is also another neurons, and you can see clearly here, they have a synaptic vesicles where they contain neurotransmitters. And as you can see from here, in the synaptic transmission, you can see clearly here, the neurons are released and then they bind to the receptors. And that is how the information is transmitted from one neurons to another, and we call it synaptic transmission. And then, so the strength and the speed of these signals can vary, affecting how information is processed. So you see, the number of the neurotransmitters, the quality of the neurotransmitters, as well as the quality of the receptors from each and every neuron in the body is actually affecting the speed and the strength of the signals that send across each of the neurotransmitter. And then one very important information that I want to give you, ladies and gentlemen, do you know that why old individual, that is age people, find it very difficult to communicate? Do you know that why sometimes age individuals are affected with Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's disease, with amnesia, that is, they can easily forget things? The reason is actually from here. If there's a problem in terms of the amount of the neurotransmitters released by one of the neurons, and also problem with the receptors that bind with the neurotransmitters, definitely there will be a transmission gap. There will be a gap in terms of message transmission or signal transmission, and that is what actually affects each individual. So you can see, ladies and gentlemen, and one very interesting thing, as human, as we age, a lot of physiological processes are declining. So as a result of that, like at this point, we have problem, or usually each individuals, they have problem in terms of the quality and the concentration of the neurotransmitters that are released. And also the problems can also emanate from the problems of the receptor, because sometimes even the amount of the neurotransmitters can be okay, but are they actually binding with the receptor? Is the receptor actually well or work enough to bind with the receptor? So usually in age-related individual, like in type 2 diabetes, the receptors are there, but their binding qualities usually decline. So that is why sometimes there is a gap. So this is what actually happens, especially in Alzheimer's disease and Parkinson's disease. And remember, Alzheimer's disease and Parkinson's disease, there are diseases that affect all individuals. So the strength and the speed of the signals can vary. And you see, some people or some people actually have this disease like mad individuals. So if you can look at it from the point of psychology, there are some people that have problem in terms of the communication in their brain. That is why they are mad. So these are actually some of the diseases that affect even mad individuals, and that is why you need psycho doctors, because you can actually look at the disease from this point where you can actually try to develop drugs and other remedies for the treatment of the disease. So then the next thing is action potential. So action potential is an electrical signal that travels along the axon of a neuron. So this is actually, of course, the real process that involves how the signals transmitted from one neurons to another. So the action potential is an electrical signal that travels along the axon of a neuron, and it occurs when neuron reaches a certain threshold, causing a rapid change in electrical signal. So this process is crucial for propagation of signals within the nervous system. So this is actually how we have the action potential is fragmented into three. We have depolarization, and then we have repolarization, and we have resting. So first, what happens in response to a signal? So whenever there's a signal, the soma end of one axon become depolarized. So whenever there is any signal or there is any information received by one neuron, then the soma end of the axon of that particular neurons will become depolarized. So the depolarization will now spread down the axon. Meanwhile, the first part of the membrane repolarize because there is an influx of sodium. So sodium ions are inactivated, and then additional potassium ion channels have opened, so then the membrane cannot depolarize again. So see, in depolarization process, what actually happened first, the sodium ion channel will be deactivated while the potassium ion will be activated. So therefore, there will be an increase, an influx of potassium ion in depolarization process. So after depolarization, then the next thing is the action potential will continue to travel down the axon. So you see, if you can look at it from here, first, in the soma body, when there is a signal, then it started from here. Then it now moved down. Then if moved down, then there is an additional potassium ion channels is opened, and then the polarization occurs, and then the action potential continues to travel down the axon for proper communication. So this process is crucial. It's crucial for the propagation of signals within the nerve system. So then the next thing is the myelin sheath. So myelin sheath, as I said, is a fatty layer that insulates the axon of some neurons, as I mentioned this. And the major functions of this myelin sheath that insulates the axon is to increase the speed of action potential propagation along the axon, and damage to myelin can lead to neurological disorders such as multiple sclerosis, Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's disease. So that is why you should understand that, ladies and gentlemen, in each and every cells, each part of the cell has its own role to play. So you see here, in the absence of myelin sheath, it means that the action potential will no longer be propagated. And there will be no speeds of transmitting information. So even from here, this can cause a serious disease. So then the next thing is the neurotransmitters. Of course, in many of my videos, I have been actually explaining those neurotransmitters. Actually, they are chemical messengers that facilitate communications between neurons. So there are sometimes some people are dull because of the problem or deficiency of some of these neurotransmitters. And that is why sometimes we encourage students that they know that they are not actually excellent students to be taking nutrients that are rich in neurotransmitters, and that will actually increase their concentration as well as memory retention and intelligence at all. So they play an essential role in influencing mood. You see, you can see that some people, they easily get angry. Why? It's a problem of neurotransmitters, because they are born naturally with some level of the concentration of the neurotransmitters. That is why there are even some food that if you take them, they will be making you happy. Like banana. Banana, they are highly rich in glutamate, which subsequently, glutamate is usually used in the brain and convert into serotonin. So serotonin is one of the hormones that increase mood. In fact, oxytocin too is a happy hormone. Endorphins, they are all neurotransmitters. It also increase mood. Then cognition, that is the intelligence, and also various bodily functions. So the neurotransmitters plays this role. So imbalance in neurotransmitters levels can contribute to mental health disorders. So people, they have mental health disorders because of the neurotransmitters, as I explained in the previous slide. So then neuroplasticity. So neuroplasticity is the abilities, or is the brain's ability to recognize itself by forming new neural connections. So this process is essential for learning, memory, and recovery from brain injuries. So that is the neuroplasticity. So it has the brain's ability to recognize itself by forming new neural connections. And then in addition, this process is essential for learning. So you can see how this neuroplasticity, it has many applications. One, it has therapeutic potential, that is disease treatment, and it's also one of the applications also that is developmental flexibility, environmental influence, then injury recovery, learning changes, brain adaptability, memory formation, experience driving changes. So all these are the applications of the neuroplasticity. So these neurotransmitters, this neuroplasticity, it demonstrates the remarkable adaptability of the neurons or nervous system throughout the life. So then what are the diseases and the disorders of the neurons? So there is Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's disease, and ALS. And then, so this condition can lead to cognitive decline. So whenever there is a problem or there are these diseases, they are associated with cognitive decline, motor impairment. When we said cognitive decline, it means that if you actually have problem with some of these diseases, then your level of intelligence can be affected. Motor impairment, it can also affect your movement. So research in these disorders aims to develop effective treatment and improve patients' outcomes. So in conclusion, neurons are vital for all functions of the nervous system, from reflexes to complex thoughts. So ongoing research continues to uncover the complexities from neuron function and communication. So a deeper understanding of neurons will enhance our ability to address neurological conditions and improve mental health. So, ladies and gentlemen, what I wanted to say at this point is that we need more research. More research should be conducted in the area of these neurons, anatomy, neurons physiology, in order to actually develop more treatment to improve mental health. So ladies and gentlemen, this is where we are going to stop. Please don't forget, if this is the first time you are coming to my YouTube channel, to please subscribe and join the YouTube community. See you next time. Bye-bye.